time today, actually. So we're really pushing things through. I've got the fantastic Sally Sloley with me today. How are you today?
I'm awesome. Thanks for having me.
That's brilliant. As you're watching this cast, don't forget, join us at remoteaf.co. Click on the community button and join our Remote AF community where we're talking about a lot of things you'll hear today and a lot of things you'll see. If you like what we do here, why don't you subscribe to our newsletter? It's in the show notes below. We'd love to have you. And don't forget, there's a lot of other things happening in remote AF space. Keep an eye out for the big announcement, something that we've been cooking up for a while. But enough of that. Let's talk about you, Sally. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself so that everybody knows you as well as I do?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm an Agile coach. I'm currently based out of Sydney, but I'm originally from the States. And the reason why this stuff is so important to me is because I used to work for Microsoft headquarters in Seattle for about 20 years. So not only did I get horribly abused under waterfall projects for years and years and years, but I was also lucky enough to be there when Jim Benson created Lean Coffee and Personal Kanban. I was there when David Anderson was working on his form of Kanban at Microsoft. We got to watch the Nordstrom Innovation Labs just taking Agile to crazy new heights. It was amazing. And now I'm here.
And now you're here. And the reason I've got you on today is because you've been doing a really interesting series. Now, before I forget, I'm saying to you that you should take that and make that into a book. So now it's on screen. Now it's recorded.
All right. You're bringing me into the world of making books, even though you just told me how painful it is, and my husband told me the same thing. Come on.
Exactly. And, you can't let your husband have a book and you not have one, right? So
this is true. It is a competition.
That's it. So you've been doing a really interesting series called Hash. Let me do it. There you go. Hash. Stop Bad Agile. So let's start by just before we talk about some of the depth of what it is, why? What kicked that off and what got you started on that?
So I've had multiple different jobs as an Agile coach since I've been here in Australia. And for several of them, I have worked with some of the most disreputable, and I call them ill-informed and ill-intentioned consultants. The kind of people who crank out Agile coaches with no respect, who force Agile on people with, no concern for fit for purpose or what's going on with them. Just all the bad anti-patterns. And at a certain point back in May, I sat down to write yet another blog post that I titled Tales from a Tired Agile Coach. And I just kept writing things like, no, story points do not equal time. No, there's no Agile op model, and the one you just got sold is fake. Just all this horrible stuff. And the list got so long that I realized there was no way anybody was going to read it. So what I did is I started doing just the statement and the hashtag and putting them out on LinkedIn. But what happened next is where it gets fun. So I was back in the US in July for Agile 2023, and Chris Stone of retrospective fame, he ran into me in one of the hallways and he said, look, do you mind if I give you a little unsolicited advice? And among other really great stuff, he said, you need something visual. And I went home and I kind of sat on that for a little bit, and I kept seeing birds everywhere, and I had one as a kid. So I was like, I'm going to do a budgie. So I started doing that. And then in the background, he was pinging me going, okay, this is really cool. Good start. But here's some other information. And the next thing you know, I've got a Skillshare account and I'm using my iPad to do art classes while I'm currently out of work and in between jobs.
Well, Chris, shout out to you. Chris is an alumni of the cast as well. So great stuff, because he's really inspired something that is catching people's attention. I know that because you're either getting good commentary or bad commentary. But we all know that either one will work. We don't mind. What I thought we might do is just talk about a few of the ones that you've done, and we can sort of banter a little bit. So, and I guess my ulterior motive is, there's one I particularly like that you did just recently, which is why brought you to my attention. I said, oh, Sally's doing that now. And I love the one, you can't copy and paste your way to organizational improvement. So I think that was Colleen. I'll own up, I'm reading it, Colleen. So you've got different names for the different birds as well, if people didn't know. So Colleen says, you can't copy and paste your way to organizational improvement. Talk to me about that one.
So everybody thinks that there's an op model. If there was an op model out there that you could copy and paste and use, everyone would have the same thing. There wouldn't be a need for a coach to be on site helping you through it. It comes down to its people problems. And so a lot of the companies that I've been with, they come in and they force everybody, including the leadership teams, to suddenly be scrum teams, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. Your busy C-suites are not going to be a scrum master or a product owner. It's insane. But yeah, they keep trying to do the same things over and over. So some of the other birds that came from that were ones like, no, everybody's board does not have to look exactly the same. I've seen consultants tell people, this is the one and only way to do a portfolio board. This is the one and only way to do a dev board. I'm going, but no, I've never seen two boards that were alike.
But shouldn't you use the model that came from a very particular music company that would work on your organization? That sort of
yes, because everybody is a streaming media company from Sweden. Sure, why not? Yeah. What could possibly go wrong with that?
Look, I'm being facetious, and you know, you and I were chatting. You were chatting offline about the fact that, you know, the thing I say to people all the time when they try to do that is, why would you take a cookie cutter model that's used in one organization and put it in your organization? Because you're just taking, you might get some good stuff, but you're taking all their problems and putting them on top of your problems. Then you got double the amount of problems, right? So
exactly. And one of the things that I hear most often is that they'll start on a path to being agile, and they're starting to think about things and collaborate better and, you know, sort out their problems. But then they get an influx of new people, and because they don't have a good enough strategy in place to protect themselves from that, they end up just falling and caving to the pressure, and they go backwards. And then everybody's thinking that agility has failed them, when in reality, it's just that nobody was with them long enough or had enough skills to show them how to create that resilience.
That's the problem, isn't it, when you bring that into the system?
It takes work and it takes time.
And I think that goes hand in hand with, I'm going to quote this one again. So Ocean had a comment on this, which was a ringneck parrot, which I owned one of those lovely birds. If someone brings a company a scaling framework before they have any knowledge of the complexity of the system or the work that exists, they're not bringing anything that will lead to agility. Talk to me about that one, because it's a slight derivative of what you were just talking about, but still.
The safe. So pointless. You can't throw this on top of a broken system. It's a scaling system, which implies you have to be agile to scale agile. When you throw this stuff on top of broken systems, what you end up with is a lot more additional waste with your PI plannings and your pretend plannings and your, you know, commitments to deliver out, you know, months in advance. It's crazy, and it hurts people. It makes them insane. And then you've got the people who don't understand, you know, people will say, oh, well, you can have Scrum or Kanban. And that's when managers go, oh, sure, Kanban, we're going to work in 2-week increments. We're all going to work in 2-week increments. We're all going to work exactly the same at the exact same time. What could possibly go wrong? And then they put a Scrum Master across 3 different teams, all of whom have their events at the exact same time. And they can't be in 3 places at once because sadly, they're not Hermione Granger.
Harry Potter reference, great. Yeah, look, you know, we see this going. It's any kind of scaling actually creates that problem. So, whilst you did mention one, there are any of those scaling methods have a problem, because, you know, the bottom line is scaling. People who are listening to this, the word scaling means that you actually have something to scale.
Yes.
So therefore, you must have the actual grassroots of agility before you try to scale over the top of it. Or what are you doing? So anyway, we could talk for hours on that. There's lots more fun to be had. Let's go a little bit more into practices maybe, and I'll pull out another favorite. Then I know you've got some there, so I'll get you to do that. But retrospectives are not limited to the 3 questions, which is great because you were just mentioning Chris Stone before. But talk to me about your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, 3 questions aren't bad. If those 3 questions are based on your team, if they're based on what the person who's putting the retro together is seeing, if it's contextual, if it actually matters. But a certain tool that claims to be agile and is clearly not has actually put in a 3-column template so everybody can use and reuse the same exact questions. Not only does it get boring, but it doesn't allow for people to be creative. Talking about stuff that's going wrong can be painful, and having someone who can facilitate you through some of those really difficult conversations, or just understanding, how to get people to work together. I've coached teams and been a scrum master on teams that hated each other, but I used the retrospective strategically to get them to find middle ground. And so that's where they're about, because it's about as much about team building as it is fixing your system.
Yeah, and I think that retrospectives tend to also get diluted in terms of, well, that's just the teams having a whinge fest. That's great. They're doing that. That's just for the teams. It's got no effect on the organisational construct as well. And I think, leadership has a part to play in all of that as well. And we don't see that too often. That's something that we need to work with leaders, that they're just as responsible within the retrospective kind of situation as anybody else.
Yeah, I had a team once who had to do reports after every sprint. And one of the things that they had to do was report on the stuff that was challenging to them, the stuff that they were working on personally and the stuff that was challenging. And after a while, their manager came to me and she said, I don't like this. I said, well, okay, why? She said, well, they keep bringing up the same old problems. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I'm not going to do anything about them. They need to stop telling me. And I said, but it's still a problem for them. Of course, they're supposed to tell you.
Yeah, you see it regularly, right? So again, that's another one of those symptoms of the issues that we see in the organisational constructs of trying to use the different parts of agility in ways that it was never meant. I think is the piece for me. So let's talk one more. I got OKRs, and then I want to hear what you've got. But I like it's very close to my heart, and I've had Jeff Godelf on here, and Raymond Pitchler and a couple of the others who really invested in it. OKRs are aspirational. It's not mandatory that they be met. Surely it's mandatory because it's an objective and it's a key result. It must be mandatory.
They're so not mandatory. They're not meant to be met. If they're being met, you're not trying hard enough. You're not really looking at the situation and being aspirational enough. It's a way to kick people out of their comfort zones and kind of reach for the stars. And some of the people that I've seen training them, their key results are nothing but a long task list. They'll have, 20 of these things spread across multiple different teams. There's zero control over who's, if it makes a change, whose work made that change. There's no way to track it. I've seen people go through an entire quarter of OKRs because they were told to do them, and then you ask how they went, and they're like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Well, didn't you have starting metrics and ending metrics to tell you what happened?" And they're like, "No."
Mm-hmm.
And there's one consultancy that's actually telling people that, you can have some that don't have to be met, but some that do. And then there are people who tie them back to KPIs and
and the other one I see from certain areas is that the actual OKRs are constructed against the actual features or epics.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So they're aligned, and the features and epics have to meet the OKRs or vice versa. And it's like, well, that's not exactly where we're meaning to go with that.
Oh yeah, painful. But of course, everybody has to do OKRs now because it's trendy.
Yeah, and it should be that they're a very powerful mechanism, and you should be using it in your network. But I think, I did an interview with Stephen Bungay, who did the Art of Action, and I asked him that question about that because he has his Art of Action and the way you construct that, and he said, "Well, there's nothing wrong with OKRs. Just be really, really careful about what you're asking for because you're going to get that and double that and maybe even triple that." And you want to be sure what the objectives are that you're setting and the key results you're setting is actually what your organisation needs. And I think that's a real spot on description of it. All right, Sally, hit me with one of yours. Oh, well, they're all your favourites.
Well, number one, you can't buy an agile transformation. You just can't do it. You can't come in that huge and change the way everybody works and expect to get any sort of results. Agility is there to shine a light on your challenges and have you fixing them and working more closely with your customers. It's not about building feature factories, but that's the way these things are usually approached. I think I did one yesterday. It was like check boxes are not going to make you agile. There's no set of boxes for you to tick. It's not make all team scrum, tick, use Jira, tick, have the event, tick. But I've seen a lot of things like agile maturity models, and that's what they're based on. Oh, are the teams doing the events? Are they having retrospectives? Well, who cares? Because if they're not being done well, and if they don't care about them, they're not going to help in any sort of way. It's just another bit of overhead, which is when you get teams saying, well, I don't want to have to do all these extra meetings. I have too much work as it is. So a lot of these transformations are just plain missing the point.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. So I'll just jump in before you go any further, and I'll just jump it up on the screen. I'm sure you'd like to answer that one. From Escalates Quick.
Well, here's another funny one that I have is that OKR, sorry, not OKRs, epics and features are not mandatory. Epics and features are just another one of those things that popped up somewhere along the line and are now touted as the thing you must do. You do not have to use epics or features.
Yeah, that's right. My answer to that question is what's quick is that when I was mentioning that, yeah, sure, your epics and features might help you get where you need to go with your OKRs, but actually making it mandatory and making it as an actual key result, the epic and feature is a key result of the OKRs. Yeah. That's not something that you want to do, right? That's not what it's meant to do.
You want to know what the teams are working on to change it, but it's not necessary that they be that closely tied together.
Remembering that objectives and key results are meant to help you change behavior, to help you change that direction of travel. They're aspirational in general. Anyway, You got me started now. All right.
Like I said, we could do this all day. Here's another fun one. Just because some teams use Scrum doesn't mean they all have to. Scrum isn't fit for purpose for every type of team. And while you can get Scrum to work for just about every type of team I've seen, it can be painful. Why would you want something to be painful for people? And that's where you get into, some teams really just kind of in the background switch to Kanban and don't say anything. They just put velocity numbers out there and, create burn down charts that don't mean anything. What it creates is a system of people gaming what happens, because at the end of the day, they need to work how they need to work, and making stuff mandatory for them is never going to help them.
Yeah. So there's quite a few things. There's quite a few things there that I want to say. But I think I'll start with Remote AF sort of defines. We look at the construct of teams in organisational as product, operational, and mission teams, right? And would you use Scrum for all of those teams? Well, the answer is very obvious. In an operational sense, they're high flux, high flow, often a lot of unpredictability. And would you use sprinting in that? Well, the answer to that is it's probably not the best thing. But I think it's the context that you need to design for the organisation rather than just say you're going to use Scrum. What's your thoughts on that, Sally?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen teams that it made it too difficult for them. Teams like support teams, where you've got a constant influx of stuff coming in from different places. You've constantly got to be able to triage these items. There's going to be change. And no matter what you throw into your sprint at the beginning of the week, it's not going to be the same stuff that, finishes up in 2 weeks. And rather than fighting against that and feeling guilty, which is what happens a lot, these teams are like, well, we couldn't deliver the stuff that we said we were going to. That shouldn't be an expectation. And it just hurts them and it makes them feel like they're less than, when in reality, they're doing an amazing job and could do even better if they were allowed to create a system that worked for them.
So let me ask you another one, which sort of lines up with some of what we're talking about here. But so there's a big thing about quarterly planning or program increment planning or big room planning. I don't care what version of it you derivative of it. But it strikes me now, well, I know this for a fact because, obviously we work with organizations across the world, that with the VUCA that we're experiencing externally to organizations, which pushes into the organization and creates that flux and move and shape now, which is faster than it's ever been, right? And pandemics prove that, but then we've got all the other things that are happening. What I'm seeing is with quarterly planning, we'll just use that one for example, by the time they've set their plan for the quarterly plan and they come back and start to work, the sand's already shifted and the plan's now invalid. And now they're having to restructure that plan. And so all of that quarterly planning. Whereas when I was first taught agility, we did what you call short cycle planning, right? No more than a month or 2 months in advance at an absolute max, because you needed to be able to pivot and adapt. What are you seeing? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, exactly. Because what happens with quarterly plannings is they think they're going to get this stuff done. And again, it's setting them up for failure. Ask any team who's done this more than once. They're always going to tell you the same thing. Wow, stuff took longer than we thought. Oh, stuff changed. Priorities for the company changed, customers changed, whatever it is, and they've got to react to that. Whereas if they hadn't bothered with all that to begin with and simply said, okay, these are the most important things to be working on right now, go teams. We're going to catch up with you every couple of weeks and check on the metrics and see if this is doing what we want it to. If it is, great. If not, we'll change it. It just sets them up for success. Yeah. Whereas, a lot of people, they think that this is, they think that it's something that it's not. To me, a quarterly planning is wishful thinking. It's like, that's nice that you want that. But if you're doing quarterly planning and the teams aren't even in the room and you've got a capacity board saying how much capacity your teams have, especially like with red, amber, green status, it's all red and it's going to stay red the entire quarter. Be realistic about it. And then you don't put that additional pressure on yourself. You put the pressure on actually spending the time to look and see if the things that you're building matter. Put the pressure on letting teams have access to their customers so they know if these things are doing what you want. Ignore all that other stuff. I love to introduce Hofstadter's Law to people.
Yeah. I mean, to me, and before everybody comes for me with the pitchforks, it's not that I'm saying that you shouldn't do quarterly planning. That might be relevant for the context of that particular organization. But in general, I think investing in that size of planning, big room planning in itself in a shorter cycle is valuable. So again, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm saying you need to design for the context of your organization. But organizationally across the world now, we're seeing a fade back from the big quarterly and those kind of planning into the short cycle planning. So yeah, which
I think is a good thing. Because they're saying that it didn't work. And when you're seeing that it didn't work and how much money and time is spent to do those things, you've got to look at the cost.
Yeah, and I think that went back to what was her name? This one, Lane. Lane saying quarterly planning is not mandatory, which is what triggered me off. What else have you got for me on your list of hashtag bad ideas?
What else have I got? Oh, Scrum is baby steps to Kanban. You do not have to get good at Scrum before you can use Kanban. My children have used Kanban. It is the easiest thing in the world. And I don't understand why people think it's training wheels. You don't need that kind of structure in order to get something out of Kanban. Kanban is so powerful.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because what I would say to most people that would say that kind of thing to me is Kanban right for what you want to do? Are you moving to Kanban because you think it's easier? Because people often go, we'll do Kanban because it's easier, which
no meetings.
It's just as disciplined as anything else, right? But intensely, it's not a learning step from Scrum. It's an actual method that's right for the right thing in your organization, along with Scrum. The two could personally coexist, and I'm not going to get in the middle of those brand wars, but even the hybrid of those two is a good thing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, what else you got for me? I'm enjoying it.
Let's see. Oh, today's, it feels kind of mean, but it's so true. Because I don't know, again, for those of you who don't know why I started this is in no way trying to tell people that they can't do what they want. There is no such thing as sprint zero in Scrum. That one hit a big, huge nerve with people. And it's not about saying you can't do it if you feel it's right for you. What I'm saying is that you should not be selling it as a thing. And I've walked into companies where they're like, all the teams are going to be Scrum and it's mandatory that they do a 4-week sprint zero. And I'm going, why? What is this accomplishing? I can kick off a team in 2 days. So it's that kind of stuff. It's about the people who are selling things as agile and making people think it's real when it couldn't be further from the truth. And what's worse is that some of it actually stifles people from becoming agile. This one is painful. This was today's. If someone is new to agile and has never worked on agile teams, don't pretend they're an agile coach. I've watched so many companies do these giant rollouts and they just tap people on the shoulder and go, poof, you're an agile coach. It took me years of acting as a Scrum Master before I was comfortable taking on that role and being a Scrum Master. It's hard. You've got to understand businesses. You've got to understand people. You've got to understand the work. There's so much going on. And then to take that to the agile coaching level with the amount of things that you have to be at least knowledgeable of, enough to be able to point people in good directions and help them and see the pitfalls of what's worked and what hasn't. It's not an overnight thing. But so many people I talk to have, they're coaches or Scrum Masters and they've never read the Scrum Guide, or they didn't know that the Agile Manifesto had principles behind it. I was at a company not too long ago. They told us as coaches not to teach people about the Scrum Guide and the Agile Manifesto because it was so far off base from their fake bot op model that they didn't want to confuse people. What?
Sorry. Yes, I see one there. Why is atheism tagged on this stream? I don't believe that it is, but I have no idea. I'll investigate that later on for you.
I like John's comment. I once launched 2 teams at the same time, one Kanban and one Scrum. It was incredible for a mutual learning experience for both teams. I love that. I love that. Yeah. I had a group of people at one point where I had a couple of Kanban teams. I did have a couple of Scrum teams, and we actually put all of their boards up on Windows. We had them across the company. And what was really fun is that everybody was looking at them and they were learning stuff from these other boards. But then their manager walked in the room and screamed at us, saying that they all had to be exactly alike. And we're going, no, they all do different stuff. They all have different needs. They have different things that they need to see. But every single one of those boards was created specifically for them. And, with feedback from other people in the company walking by, they were able to make it something that actually radiated enough information for people to get something useful out of. Managers didn't have to disturb teams because they could see exactly what was happening on these walls. That's part of the reason why I miss the days of Microsoft when we had, upstream and downstream Kanbans on huge walls across floors of a building. You always knew what was going on. There was nothing hidden. There were no hidden agendas. It was, here's what we're doing. If that needs to change, let's talk about it. But that's the current state of reality. And that's what I think is missing in a lot of the transformations that are happening here.
Yeah, I think John's followed up on that with a very good observation, that any form of agility that benefits workers and businesses does not require a framework to exist. And I think that's a fantastic thing.
Best manager I ever worked for was a woman at Microsoft who dealt with a lot of high-end developers, lots and lots of egos in the room, lots of work to be done, a lot of having to prioritize and figure out what was going to be next. And she had a system where she knew exactly what was coming. She knew exactly who was in the queue. She knew what was going on. And when someone came in screaming, she just said, look, there are people ahead of you. There are these projects that are ahead of you. If we need to sit down and talk about reprioritization, we can, but you do not just get to jump the queue because of who you are. And it was beautiful. She was basically being agile before I even knew what agile was.
Yeah, that's right. So I think some of that's great. You have to you have to customize in context for the organizational construct, right? We keep saying that. It's not a one size fits all. So I think that's good. What else you got for me? What else you got for me in your list?
Oh, the focus is not on the process and the tools. I actually know people who think that coaching from the right side of the manifesto is the way to build trust with people. You're going, but no, build the trust by helping them with their problems, not by, forcing processes and tools. Another good one is Scrum Masters are not team secretaries. Back when I got started in this, your Scrum Masters were pretty much part of the team. It was somebody or a bunch of us on the team took the role on occasion and went out and learned new stuff and brought it back to the teams. But a lot of times here it's no, you were to do reporting, you were to create JIRA tickets, you were to move their JIRA tickets, you must facilitate every single meeting. And again, it completely goes against the Scrum Guide, but when the people who are good and know this push back, it's like, no, we're paying you, you sit down and do what we say, not what the Scrum Guide says. And it's painful.
So let me ask you a question, Sally, because we've talked about a lot of stop the bad agile stuff, right? So but let's talk a little bit more about what you would do to solve some of these problems, because I think that's the interesting thing here. People are listening for is okay, we're saying some of these things, but let's start with organizational agility and thinking about that. What would be the things that you would be talking to an organization to say, if you want to take this and actually embed agility into your organization, you should do these things?
Yeah, and really it goes back to starting with respect. And something, a podcast I ran across recently was something that Dave Pryor put together. And it was with a guy who thinks that the way to start any sort of move towards agility is with personal Kanban. He said, you bring in personal Kanban, you teach every single person how to take control of their own work, how to understand who they are, how they function, what they need. And then you get the teams working together. Then they've got a mutual respect for their teammates and they're starting to work together better. It turns out to be a really beautiful thing, because then you've got teams that are working together well. They're feeling it, they're seeing it, they're getting their work under control, they're taking charge of their being overburdened, and then that spreads. And so being able to spread that good stuff is so much more important. I think the biggest thing that I try to tell clients is to ignore the noise. There's so much, we call it velocity capacity uplift bingo. It's like they're spouting out buzzwords and they're going with trends and all of this. None of it matters at the end of the day. What matters is that people understand what their customers need. They're working small so they get fast feedback. They're working together in a respectful manner, that everything is transparent so that managers aren't sitting around thinking, oh, they're not working at their capacity, we've got to up their velocity. All this other crazy stuff that doesn't get you where you want to be at the end of the day. So really just, I think it's true. I think that's one of the reasons I'm so happy to be teaching Jim's personal Kanban class right now, because that level of skill that I had has always made me more comfortable as an employee. Because I knew exactly what I couldn't do. I knew what my capacity was. I knew what kind of bandwidth I had. I didn't allow myself to be overburdened. And that's a powerful thing. If everyone has that, you can get to a point where you stop seeing manager calendars that are triple booked and their poor EAs are having to scramble every single day to figure out, oh, wait, great, which one's the most important today? Who's going to yell at me next? It's all about having that mindset of working together and working together better. Because when you do that, you don't have to think about what you're going to do to increase your velocity. It's going to increase. You're going to be delivering value faster because you're going to be delivering the right things at the right time.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing, and I think there's one of the other ones. Let me go, Rupert. Rupert says changing people's titles and accountable for skills they don't have is not going to fix the existing challenges, and it's not going to get you the transformation you want either, right? So, there's a thing about you want to build the capability and the capacity and the understanding within the context for your own organization So it's important that comes from within your organization. You may bring some people in to help you do that, but it's important that those people that you're bringing in to help you do the transformation are actually doing it in the context of your organization, which is what we've been talking about a fair bit here today.
Yeah.
What else you got for me? You got another one for me? I'm sure you do.
I do, and actually, this kind of blends in with the remote AF theme. Kanban is not just for co-located teams. I was using Kanban in days way before we had Mural and Miro and webcams on every laptop. It was really easy. I had teams where they'd have distributed offshore teams. I'd make sure that they talked for at least a half an hour every day. They both built the exact same board. At the end of the day in one country, they would send an image or a screenshot of that board, send it over. Those guys would make the changes on their board. Same thing. They'd go through their day. They'd take a screenshot, send it back. It worked beautifully.
It's an interesting thing. So with remote AF, obviously a lot of us have been doing this for quite some time, and so we'd already done a lot of distributed, worked on programs of work across the world, and within the canvases and boards that we talk about in remote AF, Kanban is part of that. So I think it's for any kind of team in any kind of context, agnostic to where they work and how they work. And I think that's the important thing that you need to do. So I like that one. And just because you mentioned it as part of remote AF as well, so that was good. All right, we've got time for
work you guys have done.
Thank you. We've got time for a couple more. What have you got for me?
Agile cannot survive in a command and control environment. A lot of companies think that their teams can be agile even though their entire system is completely command and control. I've seen some serious abuses of teams under command and control, and it defeats the purpose. And even when you bring up to them, the reasons why Scrum is so powerful, the reasons why Kanban can really help their teams, they don't want to hear it because they don't want to let go of that control, and that's fine. But the two are like oil and water, and unfortunately, maybe a little worse, oil and water in two different jars. Because they're not coming together to make a pretty salad dressing. They're just not getting together at all.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, we talked about this previously, you and I, and, the minute you put agile into an organization or you're attempting to instill agility, it disseminates control because that's by right, that's how it's built, right? That's how it's meant to. It's allow the teams to work out how they're going to work and etc. But the trouble with that, I think, then is as you said, if it's a fully command and control organization and you haven't spent or invested in the fact that your leadership need to understand agility themselves, then the only levers they're going to pull is command, because control starts to get disseminated, and that's when you start to see the things like you have to, you must, you will, you should, those sort of things.
Yeah, I've seen people police boards, they police vocabulary, they police when meetings can happen and when they get. It's just crazy the level of control that you end up with.
Well, we're right at the end of our time, Sally. It happens pretty quickly.
It does.
So it does. Firstly, how can people get in touch with you if they want to talk a little bit more about what you have to offer and even interact with you with the Stop Bad Agile?
Yeah, so if you go to sallysloley.com, that's my website, you'll see a couple of the blog posts that I wrote that were kind of the precursors for the Agile Aviary. I've got a lot about me and how I like to work and my approach, where I don't go into clients and start giving them Agile. I talk about their context, I assess what they are, what they want, what kind of outcomes they'd like to see. So I've got a bit of work out there, and then coming very soon, I'm going to have a whole lot of work around the Kanban space about how easy it is to get started, how, the boards need to reflect you, and how great your life can feel when you're unburdened from having to deal with all the stuff that's in your head all the time. Brilliant. And of course, LinkedIn, #StopThatAgile.
Yeah, of course. And we'll put those in the show notes. So If you're not really sure, we'll make sure we put all the links in that Sally's talked about into the show notes. Look, it's been fantastic having you on all the remote things. For our listeners, remember remoteaf.co. Click on the community button, join us in the Remote AF community. We love to have you because there's lots of these different types of conversations go on. If you're really enjoying what we're doing, join our and subscribe to our Team Craft newsletter. That's a fantastic thing to keep abreast of all the things that are happening. And of course, keep an ear out for the big announcement or the things that we've been cooking up for you. Sally Sloley, fantastic to have you on At Talking Remote today. Thanks so much today.
Thanks, everybody.